Please.
I would just add that for some stakeholders, like Virginia Wilderness Committee, this wilderness, of course, is the big, it's the benefit. But for a lot of the other stakeholders, it's a piece of what we've all been doing together. So we have lower cow pasture, it's being implemented. So this is exciting on its own, but more just piece of this big package of work we've done together with the plan, we did with lower cow pasture, and we're gonna keep going together. As an environmental lawyer, I love that we know the national forests provide clean drinking water to so many of us, and we've got these areas with wilderness. This will feed down into the really exceptional cow pasture river, and so this wilderness in addition is very exciting for me personally. But I think for a lot of us, it's just that this is part of the big package of work we are sticking together to do.
I would say that the stakeholder collaborative was really, there were a lot of butting heads, there was a lot of contention, but there was a lot of learning. And I think that was the benefit that I saw, is that I can understand why people want to see unmanaged areas. I'm more of a management oriented because I'm looking at developing wildlife habitat. And I want to see the forest managed, but I understand the values there. And I think also people that were supporting wilderness too can also see that there's a reason for why we want to see some things managed. And I know Mark has really been a bridge there between a lot of groups.
Yeah.
And that's been a big factor, is just coming together and being willing to listen and to hear what people have to say. And I think we're all going to benefit from that. As Kristen referred to, we've done a lot of, with the lower cow pasture, we've got a lot of timber sales in the works. We've got prescribed burns going, things that, as a wildlife biologist, I want to see done on the ground. But we're also, I can support those wilderness additions and things like that as well. So it's probably areas that we're not going to manage anyway. It's not roaded, there's a lot of characteristics there, so.
Yes, very steep, yeah.
Yeah. But I think the whole effort here, getting everybody working together and being friends, where before we used to probably not even talk with each other at meetings, has been the benefit of all of it.
And looking at,
Please, Wayne.
and looking at the forest as a whole, old growth is not the total forest in its natural state. Man has introduced fire, nature to some degree introduced fire, and the forest has been, from 14,000 years ago, fairly fragmented in places, with over 200 species depending on the growth in that fragmentation. The young forest, the bramble, the thicket, the briars, etc. With fire suppression, we lost a natural forest. And with the advent of 1491, we lost 90% of the native population that helped manage and keep that forest in a mosaic. So now we have an opportunity to come together and work toward a more balanced mosaic of habitat, not just for wildlife, but as Al mentioned, for a variety of users. The birders, the wildlife photographers, etc., are going to be really attracted to a mosaic. And that, I think, is an important feature of a stakeholder group to come together and average out what I want to see all the time I go there with what we want to see when we go there.
And one thing that you might be able to do for the press folks who are here is when they leave, email them a list of all the stakeholders, because you could tell from people just introducing themselves, but it's a very impressive and very diverse list, which really, speaks to your issue about how rare that can be to pull a group like this together. Yeah, please.
Senator, I would also like to thank you for your patience and support for this collaborative effort. Al mentioned the hard work that many of the stakeholders did coming together to develop recommendations for the revised George Washington National Forest Plan, and I'd like to thank the Forest Service for being supportive of and adopting many of the group's recommendations in the Forest Plan, and then again to thank you and Senator Warner for supporting the legislative components of that. And smart public land management and conservation requires a long-term vision and long-term stewardship, and it's just, this has been so positive from our perspective to see so many different people working together, and but we can't accomplish our goals single-handedly without support, both from Congress and from the Forest Service, so thank you and the agency for that.
It's easy to be patient and let people solve a problem and get to a place where they'll all be happy with you, rather than try to cut it off and make some happy with you and some mad. So as long as it, there's a realistic chance you can get to a consensus, I mean, that's the smart thing to do, to let that process work.
And I think I'm right in characterizing the plan revision approval process as being fairly conflict-free, or once, relatively speaking, as far as National Forest Plan revisions go, once the stakeholder group made their recommendations and the rest of the public made their recommendations, was that approval process relatively easy?
So, before becoming director of the Virginia office of the Southern Environmental Law Center, I spent a number of years directing our regional National Forest and Parks program, and I've worked on a number of forest plan revisions in the South, and the George Washington National Forest Management Plan had what I think is a very uncommon and very high level of broad public support because it represented so well those recommendations from a broad array of stakeholders coming together to say, how can the public and the Forest Service accomplish many of our shared common goals? So yeah, I think that's exactly right, at least from my perspective, and it's a really positive example of what we can all accomplish when we work together.
And one of the things that made it possible and continues to make it possible for stakeholders to work together is the support from the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah.
Here is a group providing honest brokerage, science-based direction or guidance, and balancing of opinions. And when you can do that and stay respected by, I'll bet you, everybody in the room, I think that is a valuable resource that's not easily duplicated without, a stakeholder group is not easily duplicated without that role.
And that was, for years, that was my predecessor, Merrick Smith, who is a treasure among people.
Well, and I'm sure that all of you know of the Nature Conservancy's role in this, but you may also know there's other critical parts of Virginia natural heritage that the Nature Conservancy has been key. The one that's the most meaningful to me is all the islands off the eastern shore. All the barrier islands are now protected because of very far-sighted work of the Nature Conservancy. And a lot of the land that's just on the coast across from the barrier islands, which you sort of have to protect to protect the water quality going in, Nature Conservancy's been key on that. So when I was working on my 400,000 acre initiative, and we were doing a lot of work on the shore, Nature Conservancy was really key to that. So other issues, thoughts, concerns, things I should take back with me?
I'd like to thank you for standing up on the pipeline. You haven't gotten very far, but we're still in the game with the help of the Southern Environmental Law Center. And that's a ordered project that maybe we can get back to that.
Just the latest.
Your leadership has been great.
The latest on the pipeline is, FERC has acknowledged that the permitting process needs to be redone. The current chairman came in, and I think it was in Roanoke where he first made the announcement. You're right, we got to take a look at the permitting process. Now, I don't know whether what he thinks improvements are would be what I think improvements are, but nevertheless, they've opened the door to have a discussion about permanent improvements. Morgan Griffith and I have a bill to change a number of the elements of the permitting process that we work with many of your groups on. There's a public comment period that's open with FERC about this request for comments on permitting, and we submitted, I think, Nick, was it yesterday? Probably. Yeah, probably next week. We were drafting it yesterday, but we're going to submit an extensive public comment into the record that will track very closely with the bill that we had, that we already have done. Because I think the way that the two projects were handled and what we heard from the public, who were along the way, gave us a lot of ideas about the ways the process should be.
It's great.
So, yeah, please.
I'd just like to say a couple things. One is, as far as the stakeholders collaborative, I think we owe a great debt of appreciation to the Forest Service who helped us all come together and provided facilities and infrastructure for us to come up with these compromises. They made great effort.
Yeah, let's do that.
I also just wanted to say that I have spent some time in both Ridgehold and Rough Mountain and the proposed additions, and I'm really excited. They're very special areas in Western Virginia. You really feel like you're in a remote area and enjoy, old growth, coves, pure streams, and ridge views that seem to go forever. Just thank you. I'm very excited.
That's great. That's very, very good.
And Senator Pat Sheridan is the ranger who kind of, after the plan revision,
Right.
it becomes about projects and implementing the plan. And Pat Sheridan was the ranger with the interest, the enthusiasm, and patience to kind of take on a project. The first major project that came out of the plan that was this collaboratively designed, built, and conceived of large landscape plan. So as we're clapping for the Forest Service, clap for Pat Sheridan.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
And what sometimes happens when the guy who gets the ball rolling leaves, didn't happen in this case.
That's important.
Chief Ranger McNichols came in, District Ranger McNichols came in and took the ball never touched the ground. Took that ball right down the field. And Congress, they deserve Congress's help, the Forest Service. And I think Congress has an important role at that level.
Pat, you want to say anything about getting the ball rolling?
I got talked into it, to be honest with you, to start with, but I soon realized that this was going to be a really fulfilling project. Making decisions for land management is one thing, but seeing the change in people willing to listen to each other, willing to compromise, willing to understand that on a national forest we can all get most of what we want. That's not a zero-sum game. In the past, that was, if that group wins, we lose. And that was the mentality that's still out there today. And this group of people trusting each other proved that wrong. And we can all get more of what we want if we work together. That's the bottom line message. And I'm very proud and fulfilled to have worked with every single one of these folks. The highlight of my career.
Wow, that is powerful. Well, while we're talking about highlights of careers, I'm also reminded, I just read as I was getting ready this morning that Rick Middleton announced at the SCLC that he is retiring. He announced yesterday that he's retiring in 2019. And he founded the organization, and it will now, when he retires, Jeff Gleason will be the head of the SCLC, who I've known for many years, but that's a long time at the helm of an organization. And so will you take back to Rick, please, our congratulations to him.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, other comments for the good of the order or things that we should take back, and always reach out to Gwen or reach out to Nick when, again, the forest issues are in her region, but also she's really passionate about them, and Nick will follow very closely the last chapter here as we try to get the farm bill done.
I think a real quick meta issue that we all are in favor of is national forest funding. The agency funding the forest itself for the last 20 years used to be 400 people, 400 staff members. 20 years ago was 150 or so.
Is that right, Joe?
So
We're down to about 168, somewhere in that category.
yeah. So no matter what you're trying to do, recreation, timber, fire, it's hard to do that when the pipeline is wrong metaphor, but when the pool of labor is shrinking. So to the extent that you can support vigorous funding of the National Forest System, that helps overall for sure.
We're in the midst right now on an appropriations bill. I mean, I think the appropriations is probably fairly set for right now based on the deal that we got in March and what we ended up getting for the remainder of this fiscal year for the Forest Service is probably going to be very similar to next year based on the deal. And that was generally a good deal for not just defense, but the non-defense discretionary priorities to my way of thinking. But that's important for us as we're still in the final negotiation about FY19. All right, well, listen, thank you all. Oh, yeah, please, Al. And then
This doesn't have to do with the Forest Service, but it does in some capacity, I think, 'cause it'll come back. This week, there was a bill introduced for the Restoring America's Wildlife Act. And that stands to, as it's written now, it stands to bring about $1.3 billion, I think, back to states for wildlife management, fisheries
Okay.
management, things like that. So I'm not going to ask you where you stand
well,
on that or
do you
anything.
know whether it was introduced House, Senate, both
It was,
sides?
that's a Senate bill. I think
Okay.
it's Senate Bill 3223.
We'll check it out.
And just ask your support.
Yeah. Yeah, often since I'm not on the committees of jurisdiction on public lands bills, if I'm not introducing the bill myself, like the battlefield protection bill, I often don't know when bills have come in, so we'll take a look at that one and either call you with questions, or if there's a way we can be helpful, we'd love to make it clear.
Sir, I'd like to bring your attention to a new project that we're working on in the Longdale area, which is part of the cow pasture area. That is probably the only Forest Service owned CCC park. It was dedicated in 1940. It's in a state of disrepair. It's not used near as much as it was. Not anybody's fault, really. It's just budget cuts and whatever. It's had a failed bridge in the area there. And
Steve, is that-
we're working together with the black community to try to get this park back in, at least if we can't save it and get people using it, at least stabilize everything so we don't lose it any further.
It has a history. I visited with John Knapp, who is my boss at Senator Kaine's office. He's the state director. And it was a historically African-American recreation area. There's a
Yes,
beautiful
yes.
pond there and some campgrounds, and it has, because of lack of money, gotten a little dog-eared.
Yeah,
And-
is that a copy?
You
for
can
me?
have that
Okay, good.
copy.
I'll take that with me. Great, thank you.
We would like to thank Elizabeth. The Forest Service is not an adversary of ours. They are helping us with this as much as they can. But budget cuts, I mean, they do not have anything for recreation anymore. They don't have that much to maintain the roads. It cuts our access to the forest. There's a lot going on. All these forests we have out west are devastating the forest that we have here in the east. And something's got to be done now.
And when you say devastating, you mean like pulling resources to do fire fighting and other things, to
Yeah.
take money out of your
Exactly.
basic maintenance budget?
About 57% of appropriated dollars were ending up going to help with fires
Yeah.
all over.
Yeah.
And they did pass we called it a fire fix.
Right.
But it hasn't come into effect. But anyway, it's gonna help.
Help stabilize.
2020, right?
Yeah,
It goes into effect in 2020, I think.
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's a big step in the right direction.
All right. Other issues?
I'd like to thank you for your battlefield preservation work. I work for the Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation.
Yeah.
We just got $1.2 million that ABPP money. We use it all the time.
And did you get it from multiple sites?
We got it for Newmarket and for Third Winchester.
I thought that was, Newmarket, Third Winchester. And I think we're continuing to, we've added thousands of acres down at the crater in Petersburg, which has been really good, and been slowly adding up around Fredericksburg too, so that's good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, listen, thank you to everybody, and again, I just really wanted to say I appreciate all your good work, and we will try to get this last chapter done. And just again, pleasant, upbeat encouragement, especially Congressman Goodlatte. The nice thing is in this bill, we were able to pair it with I mentioned it with some Tennessee wilderness areas as well, and where the Tennessee legislators are really anxious to get a project done there. And often it makes it go a little bit smoother when you have more people, more projects than just one on the table. So, all right, well, thank you. Yeah, very, very glad. Yeah, please.